Sky Investigation AI.
High above the Greek mainland, a Boeing 737 is silent, refusing all radio contact. Two F-16 fighter jets are scrambled to intercept to figure out why. As the fighter pilots pulled alongside and peered into the cockpit, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. The captain's seat was empty. The first officer was slumped motionless over the controls. Carrying 121 souls, this massive machine was flying fast and high, completely unmanned. This is the story of Helios Flight 522, the ghost plane, and one of aviation history's most chilling disasters. Let's rewind just a few hours before this nightmare. The date: August 14, 2005, Cyprus, Larnaca Airport. A sunny and ordinary Sunday morning. 115 passengers and 6 crew members were preparing for Helios Airways Flight 522, bound first for Athens and then Prague. However, before the passengers boarded, an unscheduled check took place. The cabin crew had been suspicious of a sound coming from the rear door. Engineers entered the cockpit to perform a pressurization leak check. To perform the test, the engineer switched the pressurization mode selector from auto to manual. The test was completed successfully, but as the engineer left the aircraft, he forgot one vital thing: to switch it back. Entering the cockpit, experienced German Captain Merton and Cypriot First Officer Karalambis failed to notice this incorrect setting just above their heads. In the pre-flight checks, this deadly detail was overlooked. 9:07 a.m. Helios 522 took off without issue. However, as the aircraft climbed, the air pressure inside the cabin began to drop. Since the system was on manual, the plane could not pressurize itself automatically. Passing 12,000 feet, a deafening warning horn began blaring in the cockpit. This was the moment the disaster was sealed. Because on Boeing 737s, the sound of the cabin altitude warning was identical to the takeoff configuration warning. Since they were still climbing, the pilots interpreted this not as a pressure issue, but as an error in the takeoff settings. The captain called the engineers on the ground. "The cooling fan lights are off," he said. Yet the problem wasn't the fans. The problem was the oxygen slowly draining away. When oxygen drops, hypoxia kicks in. It is an insidious killer. It doesn't cause pain. Instead, it gives a strange sense of euphoria and intoxication. At 14,000 feet, passenger masks deployed automatically. Passengers put them on, but the oxygen generators would only last for 12 minutes. In the cockpit, it was chaotic. Instead of putting on masks, the pilots tried to solve the issue. But starved of oxygen, their brains could no longer think logically. An engineer on the ground asked over the radio, "Is the pressurization switch in auto?" This was the question that could save their lives. But the captain couldn't process the question. He mumbled incoherently, and then, silence. The plane continued to climb on autopilot. First the pilots, then the passengers as their oxygen ran out. Everyone fell into a deep, lethal sleep. As the plane left Nicosia airspace and entered Athens, everyone expected a check-in. But on the frequency, there was only a deadly silence. Athens Tower called repeatedly, no answer. Those were the years still shadowed by September 11th. The authorities' first theory was terrifying: hijacking. The plane was heading towards downtown Athens. The government and military went on high alert. Helios 522 was officially declared a renegade. Was the goal to shoot it down or to save it? No one knew. F-16 pilots scrambled towards the unknown, ordered to intercept a civilian airliner. The plane flew in holding patterns over Athens on autopilot for 2.5 hours. Fuel was running low. Just when all seemed lost, there was movement in the cockpit. Cabin attendant Andreas Prodromou. He had survived by using portable oxygen bottles. He held a commercial pilot license. He managed to break into the cockpit. The F-16 pilots were stunned. The person inside wasn't a terrorist. He was a flight attendant in uniform, waving weakly at them. He was trying to save the plane. But when Andreas entered the cockpit, it was too late. The left engine flamed out. 10 minutes later, the right engine followed. Silence returned. With engines dead, the autopilot disengaged. Despite Andreas's desperate efforts, the plane succumbed to gravity and glided towards the hills of Gramatico. 12:04 p.m. Helios 522 impacted the ground. There were no survivors. Greece and Cyprus were plunged into mourning. The crash site was an inferno. The plane was shattered. Fire had consumed everything. To investigators, finding a clue in this wreckage seemed impossible. Yet, amidst the debris, they found a miraculously preserved piece: the cockpit overhead panel. And on that panel, the killer was waiting. The pressurization switch, despite the impact and fire, it was frozen in the manual position. Even the way the wires had melted scientifically proved the switch was in this mode at the moment of impact. But how could captains with thousands of flight hours make such a mistake? They weren't the only ones to blame. The culprit was also Boeing's design. Incredible but true. On Boeing 737s, the cabin pressure warning and the takeoff config warning sounded exactly the same. Different problems, identical sound. Pilots were used to hearing the sound on the ground. Hearing it in the air tricked their brains. After this crash, Boeing was forced to change this fatal design flaw. For years after the crash, a terrifying rumor circulated: the plane didn't fall. It was shot down by the F-16s. Because if the plane crashed into downtown Athens, thousands could die. However, autopsy reports and wreckage analysis debunked this theory. There were no traces of explosives or missiles. The plane wasn't shot down. It died a natural death because it ran out of fuel. This crash went down in history as the most painful example of how a small switch can cause a massive catastrophe. Andreas Prodromou is remembered for his heroism, never giving up until the very last second. Thanks for watching. For more aviation mysteries and analysis, don't forget to subscribe. Clear skies to you all.